Hi everyone, welcome to our event this evening. If you haven't met me already, my name is Emma. I'm from the Untangled team. Um, and if you're new to Untangle, we are here to help anyone who's lost a loved one rebuild their life after loss. We provide practical and emotional support all in one place with our on our app. We've got coping tools, community, and lots of events like the one that you're at this evening. So we're really lucky tonight to be joined by an Emma, also another Emma. And Emma is a compassionate expert in bereavement and grief counselling. Motivated by some personal loss, Emma established her company, The Helpful Coach, to provide mental health support in corporate and charity settings, as well as kind of coming to talk to organisations like Untangle as well. Emma works to empower individuals, aiming to prevent isolation and promote empathy in navigating life's toughest moments. And tonight she'll be talking to us about disenfranchised grief, what that means, and how we can cope with it. Over to you, Emma.
Thank you, Emma. Really great to see those of you that are on Zoom, and just to welcome those of you that can't kind of jump on camera and things like that. I know it's not always easy, but it's really great to be here to talk about a subject that is often not talked about. And I seem to find myself doing this a lot, is kind of raising the subjects, whether that's in businesses or speaking to individuals about the stuff that just doesn't seem to get spoken about. I feel like I was given a really great intro there from Emma. But yes, I'm a bereavement counsellor, a grief recovery specialist, and I'm a mental health trainer and speaker as well. So I do go into organisations, and I've kind of got my kind of resolution for this year is to get in and speak to more managers, because what I'm noticing is and it's something that we're going to talk about tonight, is empathic failure. So where in society and organizations that there is this kind of empathic failure, and we're left to kind of deal with our emotions and things like that on our own, which is a big part of disenfranchised grief that we'll look at tonight. So I've got a few slides that I'm going to walk through with you. I'm going to kind of share some of my own personal experience, sort of weave that in from working with clients, but also my own personal experience. And if you do have any questions, or if you want to share any comments, please pop those in the chat. And then, we also have the opportunity at the end for a Q&A as well. But if you feel you've got a burning question, please make sure that you share that with us. So what we're going to look at is what is disenfranchised grief, because certainly, it's only sort of more recently in my working with grief that I've really kind of got a better understanding of what that is. Because again, we don't really talk about grief that much openly, sort of in society or in workplaces. So we're going to explore the different types of loss, and we're also going to look at the impact and coping strategies and things like that. So first of all, it feels important to define what it actually is. So I've got a definition for you. And the definition is the grief that persons experience when they incur a loss that is not or cannot be openly acknowledged, publicly mourned, or socially supported. And there's a beautiful picture of a horse on this slide, and it makes me think of a particular client that I have worked with previously who sadly lost their horse. And again, pet loss is one. In saying pet, it doesn't feel it describes the relationship that this particular person had with their horse, and the routine that gave to that person's life, that sense of purpose for 19 years, and to then have that massive loss. And sadly, with a lot of grief and loss, there are some really unhelpful things that are said to us when we experience these things. Examples are to get another horse, get another pet, or if it's a human, it might be go and find yourself another partner. These these are the kind of phrases that can be said to us, which, you know, may have really positive intent, but are actually really unhelpful. It's really unhelpful to acknowledge our loss, but also we're not gaining any empathy or validation through that. So I'm going to look at some examples of this. So one of those examples was this beautiful horse, but there are some others. So this can be, and this was, and I haven't really openly spoken about this, because often when I talk about my grief, I talk about my son's loss. So it was 13 years ago that my eldest son's dad died by suicide, and that's as much as I say. So when I go into businesses, that's what I say, and I focus on my son's loss because of this. Okay, so the relationship is not supported. So I wasn't in a romantic relationship with my son's dad when he died. So what happens is that there seems to be less of a support or understanding if you're not the spouse, you know, if you are no longer that person's spouse. So this is where this disenfranchised grief comes from, and it's kind of like this expectation of communities, of, you know, of work colleagues. Well, you know, it's not like they were your partner. Okay, all right. But there was my son's, you know, my son's dad. It was somebody that I'd known since I was 12 years old. And actually, you know, without going into too much detail, I was there supporting him when he was in hospital. So these labels, you know, was it a spouse? Was it your partner? Were you together at the time? And I'm sure many of you are probably familiar with these really intrusive questions that people ask, trying to establish how much grief you should be feeling. This kind of, oh, you should be feeling this level. So for me, this really, understanding disenfranchised grief made me realize actually how difficult this was for me, because this was my ex, my partner, which meant that I was almost forced by society to, you know, actually, whereas if it had been my partner, if it had been my spouse, it may have been dealt with differently by society and my colleagues. So that's an example. Another example is where the loss isn't recognized, and, you know, again, really, really sad. We see this a lot, where you know, there are judgments that are made around you know, baby loss. So the example it gives here is early miscarriages happens to lots of women. So this kind of dismissal, not recognizing the relationship with this unborn baby. So disenfranchised grief can often happen where someone has experienced baby loss. Okay. A third example, and these, you know, these just a point on two. I think under two definitely comes pet loss. You know, we've spoken about that already. And number three, the griever is not recognised. So and I work with a lot of adults that have experienced. So they had lost a sister or a brother or a parent when they were very young, and therefore they were, it was this view that they won't understand grief, they're too young to understand, so therefore all of the conversations around the grief and loss don't happen around that young person, and they're often excluded from the funeral, and again left to grieve alone. And that's when it, you know, sadly it gets to a point later on in life where they realize actually they've not been given the space or the time to process their grief, you know, to acknowledge their grief, because they were considered not young enough to understand. Okay. Also the circumstances of the death. So where there is stigma or taboo, so, for example, death by suicide, a lot of families don't want to kind of discuss this, or workplaces, it's like, you know, uncomfortable. So therefore it's kind of, I think the analogy is kind of brushed under the carpet, not spoken about, and this can often lead to disenfranchised grief. Okay, and these are just a few examples just to kind of get you thinking around what are some of those situations that would come under that definition. Oh, okay, so I'm just gonna have a little look at the chat. Okay, yes. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Gosh. Yes, really good point there. Thank you, Heather. There's sometimes a lack of understanding for unmarried partners. Yeah, absolutely. Particularly if they've not been together that long. And in addition to that, I've worked with clients where so there's the kind of where there's been an affair. So the person who was having the affair with the person that's died is often not known about. So and it feels, for the family, it would feel inappropriate if that person was to attend the funeral, or if they did attend the funeral, it may be in sort of secretly. So not being able to express their grief as perhaps other people, you know, by doing readings at the funeral and things like that. There was another person that I worked with where they had almost sort of taken on a father role for somebody, and this young person had been kind of estranged from their family. So this particular person really felt that their grief had been disenfranchised because they'd taken on this kind of father type role, but wasn't able to take an active role in the funeral, or yeah, that again, that kind of public grieving, mourning. So really tricky. So what do we do with that? What do we do with that grief? Those emotions, those thoughts, those feelings? Well, often we have to hold that onto that, internalize it, or suppress it. And this is where we can see, you know, really common, where we can use things like drugs and alcohol as sort of coping strategies. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts in the chat. So, so what's the difference then? Well, the major difference here is that the grief is intensified. So it's intensified because there isn't the opportunity to be able to access the usual support. So the usual support, friends, family, coming together, having that joint opportunity to grieve, to remember the person, to have that process. And that process of reviewing the relationship, reviewing what that person was like, is really important. So the support's missing, so that intensifies the grief, and often there is understanding. And I remember when my son's dad died, I was asked to use my holiday for his funeral, and you know, I appreciate that's 13 years ago now, and I would hope that things have changed, although from a lot of clients that I've spoken to, it sadly there are a lot of empathic managers out there, but you know, that experience of being asked to use my holiday to attend my son's dad's funeral. So, and this is, you know, this is the kind of thing that can happen. So this empathic failure, lack of support, lack of recognition, not having a space to be able to express ourselves. You know, and how many times have grieving people been told, don't feel that way, and try not to think those things, and don't say those things. Okay, so we're often told, you know, who should grieve, how we should grieve, and you know, what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. So this is what can then lead to this kind of disenfranchised grief. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I can see that in the chat, you know, the impact that this can have on other relationships, you know. Yeah, thank you. So the impact then, you know, is often we can have people asking, you know, why are you getting so upset? you know, and kind of questioning our feelings. If we are brave enough to share how we feel, we might find that we're getting asked, why are you getting so upset? And this is, you know, this hidden meaning behind this is that you don't have the right to these feelings. So for example, you know, being the ex, it's, well, you know, I wasn't entitled to those feelings. Those feelings were, that grief belongs to, you know, his partner, his spouse at the time. So yeah, what, you know, imagine what that's like. And I appreciate some of you may already experience that, this sense that you have no right to these feelings. And so not only can we be told this by other people, we can internalize this. It's almost like self-stigma. It's like, well, I'm not entitled to these feelings. And I know for a very long time through my, you know, I've done all kinds of different things to try and work through my grief and sort of reduce the intensity of it. And I know that for a very long time, my focus was on my son's grief, because that felt more acceptable. That felt more socially acceptable. That's what I should be doing as his mum. I should be focusing on my son's grief. And then I realized, actually, gosh, there was my disenfranchised grief. There it was. And that I needed to really, you know, think about my emotions, my relationship, and what that was like. So, you know, we can, our grief can be disenfranchised in so many different ways. So this could be cultural expectations, society's hierarchies of grief, and gosh, you know, it's the hierarchy of, well, what relationship were they to you? How did you know this person? And sometimes it's the how old were they? You know, these questions that we get asked where people are trying to assert, and, oh, well, if you know, I remember having this conversation about when my nan died, and it was this kind of view of, oh, well, you don't need to grieve as much because your nan was older. Well, actually, I was grieving a lot because I'd had my nan in my life for so long, right? So this kind of expectation of, well, you shouldn't grieve as much for somebody because they're older and they've had this longer life. So we try, you know, as society, we try and put this hierarchy on grief, and that you should grieve is more for humans than animals, for example. Whereas actually, if we think about it, it's about relationships. It's, what did that person or animal mean to you, and what did it bring to your life? Hospital rules and protocols, and I've definitely worked with lots of individuals that have experienced loss through COVID. So not being able to do the rituals that they'd hoped, maybe not being able to go to the funeral because of the limits on the funerals, not being able to say goodbye, not being able to be with their loved ones. And we can see this, you know, these comments, these unhelpful comments from friends, colleagues, family, from funeral celebrants, religious leaders, teachers, you know, people with good intentions. However, they can say these things that can really impact our grief and leave us feeling this kind of disenfranchised grief. Authors of insensitive written books, and even counselors and volunteers, you know, often can do this kind of comparison of grief and trying to kind of categorize that, which can then often lead to this disenfranchised grief. So what can we do? What can we do about this? Well, you know, what we're not getting, because it's disenfranchised grief, and if you remember, it was talking about how disenfranchised grief, the intensity is much greater because we haven't got that access to support. Well, the value of support groups. So if you are able to access support groups where, and this was really helpful for me when I was and still am, because I think grief is something that you continuously live with. But particularly I found it really helpful joining a group where other people had been bereaved by suicide. That was really helpful to experience that validation, and also the ventilation, so that opportunity to vent, to talk about your experiences, these unhelpful things that could be said. an opportunity to learn coping techniques, because usually we learn from each other. It's kind of, what are you doing to help, and also giving you hope, seeing people and how they're living their lives. That can give us that hope that perhaps the intensity can reduce, and we can start to do more of the things that we would like to do, and think about how can we continue that. And some of you may have heard of the kind of theory of continuing bonds. How do we continue our bonds with our loved ones, and move forward with that? So there's the group side, the connection, and whatever that looks like for you. So Untangle is great for that, accessing that group support. And also thinking about therapy. So some of the common things that we explore in therapy is the lack of meaningful ritual. So not having the opportunity to attend a funeral, for example, not being able to kind of vocalize their grief, not being able to read a passage or a poem or something like that. We discuss the intentional exclusion. So if people are excluded from certain events, remembrance events, things like that. And also the unintentional exclusion, because there is also can be quite a lot of misunderstanding around whether whether an ex would want to be involved in a family event or something like that, a remembrance event. So sometimes it can be unintentional. And also in therapy, there's the opportunity to explore this empathic failure. So, and acknowledge that. So where we have been failed by others, whether that's line managers, colleagues, friends, parents, where we haven't received the empathy and understanding, the validation of our experience. So honoring that grief, first of all, recognizing that it's disenfranchised, and then being able to find a space to be able to work through that, and really acknowledge where that kind of empathic failure is. So those are the key things that I really wanted to share about disenfranchised grief. There's more reading you can do on the subject, more learning you can do on the subject, but I think that the key part is this kind of, from my experience and working with my clients, is just that real lack of understanding and acknowledgement, and the comparison that can happen where people will compare your grief to other people's grief, and whether you should or shouldn't be grieving, and that's what then causes that disenfranchised grief. So I think, if it's okay with you, Emma, I think we're gonna sort of open up to some questions, I think, or discussion.
Yeah, of course.
So would anyone like to unmute and ask a question, or share your thoughts? If you've got a comment or a thought that you'd like to share.
I would.
Hi. Elaine?
Eileen, hi.
Eileen, sorry.
Hi. I would say the hardest thing for me would be that first. I lost my ex-boyfriend to suicide on September 11th of this past year, and I was still completely head over heels in love with him, and he wanted to go home, but it was very toxic, and I was to the point where I didn't care if he killed me in one of his fugues, but I didn't want to be traumatized. And he was very suicidal and couldn't get help. Okay, so for me, we weren't broken up, because most every moment of my day was consumed with feeling like I was depriving myself of his company by doing the right thing and being the adult, and trying to go no contact, because he was escalating his behavior for my attention over the years. And so I realized I was contributing to his behavior, and I couldn't get help for us. And so anyway, I have just been completely feeling abandoned, and I'll get to the point of my question, because I don't mean to ramble.
Thank you.
It feels like everybody else died in my life too, because of the abandonment. That first week was awful. That first wave of the grief tsunami was all about, oh my God, this is my worst nightmare. I was so afraid. He's done it. He's done it. And then as that wave receded and I came up from the psychosis, gasping for air, it was just so painful. Like, I almost think that was worse.
Mm.
The abandonment and lack of support, even though I was looking for it. And so I'm so angry. And I am really close with my sister, but I can't speak to her. And it's been 4 months.
Yeah.
I'm so angry. So yeah, I don't even know how to verbalize the question. Really? I
Yeah.
feel like I've lost everybody, but part of it's my own unwillingness to be able to forgive them. And it's making it last and last and last. And now it's infecting my communication with everybody else in my life. And so I could sit here and say, other people are, like would say, oh, he ruined your life doing that. And then another person will say, oh, he did you a favor. But the truth is, this wasteland I'm standing on is now my own creation.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm suffering from the same thing that killed him, this rejection rage. I perceive it in everyone to the point where if you give me a gift or something, which aren't many people doing that, I just think they're full of shit. And what are they after? I
Yeah.
know it's me now, and
So
it's scary.
there's so much loss there, Eileen. You know,
I'm
you're
gonna mute myself now so I don't keep talking.
hard. Yeah, I was just gonna say, Eileen, there's just so much loss there, you know, the loss of your loved one, the loss of trust in being able to trust people's intentions because of this abandonment, and the loss of the relationship, you know, not having contact with your sister for 4 months, you know, and it's so hard because, you know, there's part of you that's like, how dare you to abandon me, but then there's another part of you that needs that validation, needs that support, needs that empathy. Yeah.
Yeah, and since I wasn't okay before he did it, and he was, of course, everyone hated him because of the toxicity and drama of our relationship.
Mm.
um, you know, yeah, it's hard to conceive of how people can't see I'm like on fire,
Yeah.
or I'm drowning, or I'm being mauled by a bear. And I've been through a lot of traumatic grief, which I won't list them here, but this is by far the worst I've ever. And I'm like, how do you not see this?
Mm.
Oh,
Yeah.
what? I'm dying. But then, yeah, and I know a lot of it's because he killed himself too. And I haven't had good luck with the local grief support groups at all. I even had one lady, I was only 3 weeks after he killed himself, tell me, get over it. You were trying to break up with him anyway. And I just felt like, oh my God, if they're going to say that to me here.
And no, yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that, Eileen. I'm so
Like, how can they not see it? I've lost children. The only way this could be worse is if he was my child, because I was so involved in rescuing him. And he would have died sooner if we hadn't been in a relationship because of the things he was doing. So I got roped into being responsible for keeping him alive. And I said, well, I'm going to break up with him. I know you'll support me if he kills himself, because it'll really mess me up if he does. And then when he did, everybody just vanished or called me once. Oh, I'm so sorry, Eileen. Well, at least at least you're not taking, he threw himself in front of a car, in front of a hospital.
So then all the at least comments come in, and they're not empathetic, are they? That's not it. It really sounds like a major
I think I'm
empathic.
just going to have to find the money to do something online for therapy.
Yeah.
I'm not getting better on my own. It's too much, and there's too much baggage from before. And is suicide, is this why it feels like just a never ending sweater thread of horrible trauma?
Yeah.
But the only thing I could say is that the flashbacks for when I was 4 years old for some very graphic stuff that went on for years has stopped because somehow I rescued my inner child during that first month during a meditation. And that's another deep story, but I've got lots of other stages in my life that are not resolved. But that main core one from when I was 4, that was really troublesome the first month after he killed himself. And I'm like, I've got enough. I don't need this, you know. But somehow that was what got me to storm back into that farmhouse and then realize I don't hate her. Oh my God, I abandoned her here in this farmhouse and hated her for it for all these years, you know. So that was, but I don't know what to do with that. I took a little stuffed animal, made her my inner child, and it still works if I hug it, but I can't be hugging that thing all day long. You know what I mean?
But it sounds like that's what you need. You know, it sounds like that's what you need is to really
4 months.
be
When am I
happy.
going to be functioning again enough to go out in public and not worry about, my hostility so high that I'm doing it to myself now. I'm alienating myself so bad and it's so scary. It's like slipping down a muddy slope. Who am I? Anyway.
Yeah. Who are you?
I used to care about people. I'm so self-obsessed now.
Yeah.
And
So you mentioned earlier, Eileen, that you just want this to be seen. Why can't people see this? And it really sounds like that's what you need, you know. And it's great that you're doing this inner child, you know, to soothe and comfort yourself. That, you know, it really sounds like you know what you need, you know.
well,
And
I've had way too much therapy. That might be part of the problem in a way, but
that's self-awareness, isn't it? Yeah.
but I am coming from a really, really dark, deep hole. So, but a lot of the things I've learned just haven't manifested into a more functional life,
Yeah.
or I wouldn't have been with this guy in the first place.
Yeah, it's all connected. Yeah, I can see that. But thank you, Eileen. I really appreciate that. And I'm sure there are other people in the group that listening to you I think it can validate other parts for other people, as that kind of knowing that, you know, I'm sure there's other people in the group that haven't had contact with family members and things like that. So thank you. Okay, let's have a little look. So we've got some other questions that have come in. So Heather, what's your question or comment?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, Emma, I want to say thank you for sharing, and I totally appreciate your situation. I just want to try and be brave enough to put the other side across, because I did exclude my late husband's ex-wife to the funeral. My mum had died a few weeks before. I had literally just had the funeral for her, and so I knew I couldn't do a big funeral when he died suddenly, and so we only had very close family. And my husband's ex, they'd been divorced for 15 years. She had been mentally ill and sectioned, so although it wasn't her fault, he had been suffering and in a lot of pain because of her actions, although no blame attached to her through that, but it had been very, very difficult. And I knew the very, very last thing he would want was for her to be there at a very quiet funeral. My late husband, Giles, had 2 children, one of whom wasn't in contact and would have been distressed by her mum attending. And so I did say, no, I'm sorry, this really isn't for you. I did offer other alternatives, but at the end of the day, I knew it wasn't what Giles would have wanted, and I knew it would distress his daughter. So it wasn't being unfeeling and saying, I'm the spouse, you can't attend. I offered to meet her separately and go to memory garden and all these things. But in the end of the day, I do remember Giles saying when my dad died that in the end of the day, you can have your views, your brothers can have your views, but it's your mum as his spouse that has got the final say in what she feels will be right. And so I took comfort from that I was just doing the best I could in the circumstances. I just wanted to sort of be brave enough to put the
Yeah,
alternative.
and I'm so glad that you did.
That's okay.
I'm so glad you, because it's so difficult to cover such a complicated subject in such a short period of time. So it's great to have that different perspective on it. So from your perspective, and I'm, gosh, there's so many conflicting needs, so many, and this is one of the challenges when I'm working with clients is, you can have siblings from the same family and they can experience grief in completely different ways. So trying to meet everyone's needs. And like you said, what was really important to you was to honor what he wanted for his funeral, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. So thank you for being brave. Yeah, thank you. Who else have we got? We've got Catherine. Have you got a question or a comment?
Yes, hello. Just two very brief comments. First of all, thanks to the speakers and to those who shared. I just first of all wanted to lend support to kind of the idea that people are not aware of the burden of grief, and there does tend to be a profound sense of isolation after loss. I noticed that not once, but twice. I had two parents. My both parents died from pancreatic cancer within 2 years of each other, and I took leave of my professional life to assist them in their cancer journeys. And it's astonishing that once people go to the funeral, they literally will just, you don't hear from them. And I found that the most profound this past Christmas, in that my father had passed not even a month before, and I got zero cards, I got zero calls. I couldn't understand. It was like non-existence, and it's just such a difficult thing to process. It's very confusing how this dynamic is so common. The second thing that I wanted to raise, which I hadn't heard our speakers dwell upon too much, is, and I don't know if any of the other participants have experienced this in their grief, is that if you work or if you're a professional, it seems like there's a profound inability to engage. I don't know if you have experienced, I experienced it, but for the first month after my father's death, the month passed, and it's just like, I don't even know where it went. It takes days or even a week to do like a simple task. There's just the inability to focus and collect oneself. And I don't understand this. If any of our speakers would be able to cast some light on this, I think it would be very useful.
Yeah. I mean, there is a book. I'm just looking up at my bookshelf, and I don't think it's on that one. I think it's in my bedroom bookshelf. But there is a book which is all about how the brain changes with grief. So it changes the structure of the brain. And it impacts our executive functioning. So that absolutely makes sense, what you're saying. Yeah, sadly, it's that changes in the brain.
It would be great to understand that better, because it poses for those of us that try to work during the period of grieving, or during, if we had caregiving responsibilities preceding that anticipatory grief. I mean, it's very challenging to maintain professional, any sort of professional interaction when you're grieving. It's not immediately clear why. Those resources would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got someone that has popped the name of the book in the chat. That was amazing, because I was looking for it and it wasn't there on Michelle. So The Grieving Brain, there you go, from Mary O'Connor. So yeah, it's a great one to understand. And then thank you, Catherine. And then I think we've got Gina, I think.
Oh, thank you for calling on me, and thank you for having this discussion around grief. You're absolutely right. It's not something that is talked about enough, yet it's all something that we're all going to experience at some point or another. My son passed away just over 2 years ago, and that is something else altogether. Something else altogether. My life just fell apart around me, and it's a good job that my body can automatically breathe and automatically beat my heart. That didn't sound quite right, because I just wasn't capable of anything. And that was quite interesting what you said about the grief brain. And you know, and the loneliness and the isolation. You know, for the first 6 months, I was in shock. I'd actually wrote my car off going to see him take his last breaths. So I had to deal with insurance and all of that. And but I did it. And I was still driving about. And I would just tell anyone, I'd blurt it out. My son passed away. My son passed away, you know, not so much to get attention, just to make sense of it, you know, just to get it out. You know, I'm not backward about sharing, to be quite honest with you. I'll be on Zoom, random Zoom meetings. Oh, my son passed away, you know. I'm actually in the right Zoom meeting for it tonight. And you know, so yeah. And I've sort of, and after the shock, I think after about 6 months, I ended up with a cat too, which is as a help. I call him blissful strength, because you don't know how strong you are until you've lost the child, to be quite honest with you. And I was just about, it felt like, forgive the pun or the expression, pulling myself together, but I don't mean it like that. I was just about, well, my life has been reduced to just putting one foot in front of the other, which is all any of us can do, but mine were minuscule. And I just about got to that stage of, and then my mother announced that she had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and then she passed a year later. And that just like threw me for six. I've got an amazing bereavement counselor. She's been working with me, and she says I've got complicated grief. But talking about, yeah, and isolating too. Yeah, no one's, I mean, the funeral, my family said to me, they were so horrible the night before. And my family said, if you dare say anything or do anything, we'll never speak to you ever again. It was just awful. My daughter and I fell out. It was just awful. It was alcohol that was the hospital murdered him. Really, that's what they do. And it was just awful. I wasn't allowed to read anything or say anything at the funeral. So I've never heard of the expression disenfranchised grief, but I'm doing the best I can. And then it's not only all of that, as if that isn't enough. I've also been working, perhaps like one of the previous speakers said, on past childhood stuff, childhood trauma too. So it's like this whole big package that I am picking my way through. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share.
Yes,
it really helps to share.
Yes, it does. And I'm wondering if it is that younger part of you that is there going, my son has died. It's that kind of needing that help and support. And it's great to hear that you have got that bereavement counsellor, and that bereavement counsellor is giving you space, because it really sounds like, you weren't given that space to be able to, especially as part of the funeral, to be able to think about what did you need for your grief.
Yes, yeah, I'm just putting my video on. It's not very pleasant for you to speak to a black screen. It's still black. I'll put my video. I see.
There you are. Good to see you.
Thank you for recognizing that. Yeah, I didn't have an option. The only choice I was given in the funeral was the flowers. And they went with a Chelsea theme, because you're English, so you get that, of blue and white. And I nearly went with that, and I thought, no. And they had him cremated on bonfire night as well. He died, passed on the 9th of October. I saw him in a coma twice and in a casket. No mother should see that ever, but there you are. So with the flowers, I thought, right, I'm going to choose the most colourful, vibrant, smelliest flowers that I can. And I wrote a card saying that these flowers represent the joy you brought to my life, James. And they're representative of all the fireworks that are going off tonight, of all the joy you brought to the world. Something along those lines it was. So that was the only choice I had, but I ran with it. And I was going to say,
you made the most of that small choice that you had. Yeah, I
did. And now me and my daughter are speaking, and I've been there for Christmas twice since, and she's come down for the birthdays. So that's all good. So, things are moving in a positive direction, and it's now 2 years, October, November, December, January, 4 months. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I've really grieved properly, but it kind of feels like it's getting better. Does that make any sort of sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're putting a lot of work in, you know. It sounds like really doing that work, that therapeutic work. So yeah.
Can I also just say breath work?
Oh,
Breath
right.
work helps.
Yeah.
Breath work, yes. Where you do conscious connected breath through your mouth. Well, I don't, I do it through my nose. And you sort of, you know, you find the pain in you and you just breathe into that pain and love that pain. And the more attention you give it and embrace it, it kind of eventually in that session, I'll say, will dissipate.
Mm.
It's a very good stuff.
Yeah. Thank you, Gina. Thank you for sharing that. It's very helpful. Right. Okay. How are we doing? We've got about 10 minutes left. Thank you. So we're going to go to Krista next.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Well, I guess y'all can take comfort in knowing like disenfranchised grief is global. I'm calling from North Carolina. My mom, hold on, I'll get it out. My mom died 8 months ago, but a couple of observations, and I wanted to see if you had any comments. But one is like, I'm just shocked at how many people are like compared, you know, the death of my mom to like their child going off to college or their divorce. That's just like hard for me to like comprehend, because like those people are still on earth and they could still call them and talk to them and hear their voice if they really wanted to, even though it's, you know, college and a divorce or university. And then my second comment, I just want to know, you know, if you had any response to is like there's this whole subset of people that are there for you in your life for like the good, the happy, like rainbows and unicorns, like my wedding. And my mom died 6 months after my wedding, but yeah, like people will be there to celebrate anniversaries, birthdays, weddings, but like when it comes to like this, they'll like disappear, ghost, not be around. So I'm trying to like not lose friends that way, and I'm trying to remember not everyone has the capacity to handle grief, but I just didn't know if you had any like information or comments on that.
Just that it's so common, Krista, and I don't think that helps because it doesn't make it any less painful. But yeah, just the lack of support and empathy, and I'm so sorry that you've had those comments. Because like you say, how is that a comparison? How is that anywhere close to what you've experienced?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know if I'd like with the folks that, you know, or show up for the good and not the bad. I mean, I don't know. I know you can't tell me what to do, but do y'all just accept them for that type of friend? They're just, you know, the friend for the celebrations, or, you know, do you and maybe just put them in that category? And yeah, because I think, you know,
and I think I guess it makes you evaluate the relationships and who's really there when, you know, when this kind of stuff happens, who's there by your side through those happy times, and I think it just really makes you cherish those. And where can you find that support, where people do get it, where people aren't going to fail you from, you know, by not giving you the empathy that you need.
Right. I guess it's a lesson. Yeah, I definitely have learned the people that have been there for the grief. Like, I know I can talk to them about anything. And I've been shocked by some others, like even people who were in my wedding. And I'm trying not to eliminate friendships, but I think, yeah, they aren't those people to go to for the yeah, all of it. I mean, they're just kind of the superficial friendships now, which is sad, but I'm sure y'all have experienced that.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because there's a comment that's just come in the chat. The loss of support during the period of grieving sounds like a grief in itself. So it's almost like this loss has then created another loss, which is the people that weren't there for you as you needed them. So that's kind of a secondary loss that you're experiencing. So yeah, is I guess it's just noticing your feelings around that, and another loss.
Yeah, that's a good spot on call out, because I do feel like I'm grieving like my best friends who were in my wedding who weren't there for the loss of my mom. So I think I am grieving both. So thank you for your time and everyone that shared.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Okay. Next was Amber. Hi, Amber.
Oh, hold on. Hey, yeah. So I was just kind of looking in the realm of, like, I lost my dad in 2007, and then my grandmother died in 2020, and then my aunt died in 2021, which was, like, just kind of loss and that sort of stuff. And it was like my grandmother actually like felt like harder than my dad. But it was like, also then I realized, okay, I had my grandmother for more years than I had my dad, like was mentioned before, and just that grief there. But so then last year, I had a really bad like friendship breakup kind of thing. And that in that season, that felt harder than all of like the death loss. And so I just wondered if you like could speak to that, like, obviously like death is hard, but like death that then like you're still living with the consequences of whatever, was just, it felt so hard. And I even said out loud, I was like, this is worse than the death of my dad. And I'm like, do I really mean that? At the time it did feel like that. I'm not sure that that's like true, but I don't know if you have words on that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this will resonate with you, but there was someone that I was working with that, and actually I can relate to this too, but it'll be interesting to know what your thoughts are. Is that kind of is not, so when you're going through something, you're, whether that's loss of a friendship because of what's happened, that person, so maybe maybe your grandma was there when your dad died and was there for emotional support for you, and then when your grandma died, it's kind of, well, what support have you got? So it's also how much support and validation are we getting from our circle around us, and the more people you lose, the smaller your support circle is getting. So it feels more intense, it can feel more painful.
Yeah.
I don't know how that sits.
Yeah, I think that's a different perspective too. Yeah, because my grandmother was there, and even with the loss of my aunt, she was like a second mom to me, just kind of like a continual, like you said, you're kind of like nicking away at this stuff. So that is a new and good perspective. That definitely makes sense. Yeah, and then like I said, like just the friendship breakup stuff, you're just kind of like, I guess just because I'm such a relational person, so then it's like the loss of something that I value a lot too, and obviously it wasn't like they didn't die, so it's like an active choice of that thing, and maybe that feels harder sometimes too. So
yeah, and I think there's this idea that grief accumulates. So the more we're accumulating, and if you think about it, through our lives, we're accumulating more and more grief because we're experiencing more life, which means we're experiencing more loss. So our kind of tolerance, our resilience is being tested. And this is kind of what got me into mental health, to be completely honest with you. Is I had this mindset which was just keep swimming, and I was experiencing loss after loss, and relationship breakup and all of these kinds of things. And then I hit a brick wall. I was like, oh, I can't carry anymore. And that was the realization that actually now I need to do something about my mental health. So it's this, we're accumulating all of this grief, and we're in environments where we're not given the space or the opportunity, and unless we've got great family members who listen and validate our experience, but even then, because they're grieving that loss as well. So this is why often people go to therapists, right? Yeah, but thank you for sharing.
thank you very much.
Okay, is there anyone else? I think we got 3 minutes. I don't know if we want to do a bit of a kind of summary, Emma, kind of, yeah. It's just, I think the more I do these kinds of conversations, and I'll be completely honest with you, you know, it's not easy being vulnerable and kind of sharing my own experience. But it's really validating to hear your stories, to know that actually, although it's awful that there's this empathic failure that happens, that people are isolated, that actually this is people, something that people experience, and which is why it's important that we have these networks, these support groups, and access to spaces like therapy, and what works for you. You know, we've heard some really great comments around what has helped people, and I appreciate everyone's different and your experiences are going to be different, but knowing that there are these options, that it gives us hope that actually, okay, I have got a network, or I have got something that I could try and reduce the intensity. You know, grief is something that we live with, but do we have to live with it with such intensity, right? So I don't know if you wanted to do a kind of final words, Emma.
Yeah, I think just thank you, Emma, obviously recognising yeah, everyone's stories has been so powerful this evening, and thank you so much for sharing, kind of giving tips, and also I think talking about things that, as we said, just aren't really talked about, but I think are so common, especially the sort of friends dropping off, and we see that every day on the app, people talking about that. So thanks for kind of holding that space for us. And yeah, thank you everybody for coming tonight. We're running lots of other events around grief and loss, so you can download the Untangle app to kind of get to know when they're going to be out and what's coming up. I'll put the link in the chat there, and we'll also email around more information tomorrow as well. But yeah, thank you so much for coming. Hope you all have a nice rest of your evening, and hopefully see you at another event very soon. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.